All right. Hello, Prashant. This is Brandy speaking, and I'll be presenting the session today. So you are the only one online today, which is fine. Oh, we just got a second person in named Anna. So you two so far are the only ones who've signed in. I'm happy to proceed with the lesson, but I need to make sure you can hear me first. Can you both kindly type the word hello into the Zoom chat box? And that way I'll know that you can hear my sound clearly. So I'll wait for you to type before we can continue. Oh, right. So Brigitte can hear me. How about Anna? Perfect. Okay, great. So we can use the session as, I guess, kind of like a little mini tutoring group, if you will, since we are such a small group. So I'll very quickly introduce what we'll be doing, and then I'll ask you a couple of questions about yourself so I can understand what your purpose is for taking CAEL. So I don't know if you're brand new to CAEL or if you've taken our webinars before, but by default, the microphones on Zoom are muted. So it's probably more comfortable anyway if we continue to use our chat box in Zoom here to communicate. So if you do have any questions at all about CAEL or about the writing exercises we'll be doing today, please put your questions into that Zoom chat box and I'll answer them as we go. Now, I will be asking you questions too, because I want you to participate. It is a long session and it's an academic session. So if all you both do is sit back and watch, I don't think you'll have too much fun. I don't think you'll remember too much either if you do it that way. So if you're willing to participate and offer your own ideas regarding the writing exercises we'll be practicing, that would be better. And we can share our comments there in the chat box too. We'll see how that goes. So our sound seems to be working just fine. So let's continue on. You could take notes today if you wanted, but honestly, I think as long as you participate and follow, you can take screenshots of anything you find useful. But within the next 24 hours, we'll call it, we will be emailing you with a study pack of materials. So you'll have the writing samples that we'll be looking at in session today. You'll get those separately, so you can always review them later on when you're fresh. You'll also receive a link to access a recorded version of the academic writing webinar. So again, if you can't stay for the full 2 hours today, no problem. You can always just click that link when you get it in the email and you can rewatch the recorded version at your leisure. Okay, so this is me. I'll introduce myself and then I'll ask you both a bit about yourselves as well. So my name's Brandy and I'm an online instructor for the CAEL test. I'm also a content developer. So I help to put together little study exercises, etc., that we can all do to boost our academic skill set. I've been teaching for almost 25 years now, all said and done. And most of my teaching has involved working with adult learners like yourselves, covering basic literacy all the way up to academic skills required for university and college level and so on. I've been working for the CAEL test for about 5 years now as well, helping people to get ready. I'm also, by the way, initially from Ontario, and I now live in Vancouver in British Columbia. All right, can I ask both of you, where are you from? I always try to guess based on your names, but I realize I shouldn't be guessing. I should just ask. So Prashant and Anna, why don't you let us know where you are initially from? You can even let us know where you live now if you want. So again, I'm from Ontario. I now live in Vancouver in British Columbia. What about both of you? Prashant, trying to guess where that name would be from. Oh, I'm glad I didn't guess Prashant. I don't think I would have said Nepal. Yeah, so I sometimes try to get in my head who is in my session today. But you're from Nepal. Very, very cool. I've never been there myself, but I'd love to go someday. And Anna, I figured you had a Spanish name of sorts. You're from Colombia. Okay. And you both live in Toronto. Well, there you go. My hometown is about a 4-hour drive north of Toronto. It's called North Bay, Ontario. So that's where I grew up. And I actually don't know Toronto that well, but of course I have been there as it's a big city. Well, that's wonderful. Thanks for letting me know where you both are at. Here's what, oh, and also I should ask too, are you both taking the CAEL test to study, to attend school in the fall? I guess we're in the fall now, but I'm just wondering sort of what is CAEL going to do for you? What's the purpose for taking it? So most people take it to study at a university or college in Canada. Other people might take CAEL if they're looking for, say, a work designation, some sort of a professional designation. So I'm curious, are you both looking to study here in Canada at some point in the near future? That's what this webinar will do. Okay, perfect. Yeah, Prashant says yes. Okay, good. So you're both looking to study. And I always figure as much because that's sort of the main reason why CAEL was created, as it is an academic test. So that really helps me out, just knowing what your purpose is. So what we're going to do in session today is I will introduce CAEL to you, just so we understand what all 5 parts of the test are going to do. But we are focusing exclusively on the writing sections today. So we won't get into any of the other speaking, reading, or listening parts today. There is a long writing piece that you would need to complete in part 4 of the CAEL test, and that involves writing sort of like an essay. It would be about 3 to 4 paragraphs long. And then there's also a little short piece of writing in the last part of CAEL, and that one's just 1 paragraph. So we will talk about strategies to approach these questions. We're also going to look at sample written responses today. We'll examine some mistakes and errors that people might make and learn how we can fix them so we can produce a higher level piece of writing. At the very end, I always introduce to our study materials, just so you have other things you can do while you're waiting for our next live webinar. So again, just a quick overview about CAEL. As you both know, since you're taking it to study at a university or such in the fall, or sometime, I guess, the reason we call CAEL the CAEL test, and it's spelled this way, is because the word CAEL is an acronym. It stands for the Canadian Academic English Language Test. So academic is the main word there, meaning it's a higher level test for sure. It is 100% Canadian too. It was actually designed in Ottawa, which is Canada's capital city, many, almost decades ago now. But it's gone through various, revisions and so on, and it is now delivered to you completely online. There are no paper copies of this test anymore. So when it comes time to take the CAEL, you would take it from either your home computer or you could take it at a test center at the computers there. The test itself is what we call integrated. So when we look at the long piece of writing and the short writing today, we have to understand that you'll be writing about details you've learned in the reading and listening passages on this test. So integrated just means all the skills combined. So we do have to understand what we've listened to, what we've read, and pull the details from those source materials in order to guide the details in the writing. So again, we'll be looking at that today. The topics, by the way, of the reading and listening passages are always based on arts or science backgrounds. So it appeals to everybody's interest, we hope. And again, we've discussed this. You're both taking the test for your studies, which is great. Every major institution across Canada does accept the CAEL score as well. And again, some people might take it for a professional designation, depending on the career that they've chosen for themselves. But by the time you're done the test, and by the time you're ready to apply for entrance into your school, you'll have a very good understanding about your readiness to proceed. So you'll know what score you received, and whatever school you're applying to will tell you what score they're looking for you to achieve as well. Now, have either of you taken any of our practice tests? There are 2 free practice tests on the website. So I'm just curious, have you already done some practice on your own and have a sense about the types of questions? Or maybe you're completely new. This is your first introduction to CAEL. So again, just sort of helps me gauge what you already know. Yeah, okay, good. I'm glad to see. Again, you don't have to obviously have taken tests to be here today, but it's nice to know that Prashant's tried a few, whereas Anna, on the other hand, it's the first time. Yeah, so that's fine. You come from different perspectives. But again, this webinar is going to give you an overview of the writing skills. And it looks like we've got Omar online too. So Omar, welcome in. We're just getting going here with the writing skills. Now, I mentioned when you go to book your actual test, if you live in one of these 13 countries, and I know already Anna and Prashant are both in Canada, Omar, you can let us know in the chat box where you currently live as well. If it is in one of these 13 countries listed here on the screen, you could take the CAEL test from your home computer, provided you've got a strong internet, Wi-Fi signal, etc., and are comfortable doing the test on your own. If you do take this test in a testing center, you will have staff in person around you. So if there are glitches with technology, etc., they can help you out. So again, you have a choice. Some people prefer to stay at home, but it's up to you to troubleshoot any issues at that point. There will be a proctor, by the way, having eyes on you through the camera in your computer if you do take the test at home. So there will always be somebody there, I guess, to assist and watch. But it's totally up to you. Some people prefer to stay at home. It looks like Omar is currently living in UAE. So there you go, Omar. You could also, if you wanted, take this test from home, as it is one of the countries that has been set up in order to offer that. And you're from Egypt. Very cool. We've got a very international crew here online today with just the four of us. So it's always excited to see that. Here's your entire CAEL test, all 5 parts in this exact order. Those little brackets are just reminding you where the different skill sets are going to be combined. So in part 1, you're only speaking. That's sort of the warm-up. But in part 2, you can see you'll be reading and then speaking about what you've learned. Part 3, you're listening, answering questions, and then you'll be speaking about what you've learned there in the lectures. And it's in parts 4 and 5 where you'll be reading, listening, and then writing. So again, different skill sets combined in different ways. So it takes the average test taker about 3 hours to complete CAEL. It is a long test, yes, but it's sort of like a major exam that gets you ready for your university studies. And the different topics I've underlined there, just remind us, whenever we're reading or listening, there will be a different topic associated with either an arts or a science-based background. And again, the length. Now, the good news is you do not have to have any background knowledge whatsoever about any of these topics. Your job is to prepare for your English language. So provided you can understand what you're reading about on this test, and then also through the lectures, you can understand that content, you'll have all the information you need to then answer your questions. So again, this is just showing you a list of possible topics you might encounter. But do not feel you have to go out and study what these things are about, as the source material on your test will provide the information for you. So that's the good news. All right, and your scores as well. Now, I don't know if you've already picked out the school where you might want to study, but I'm curious, do the 3 of you have an understanding about the score that you're going to need for whatever your purpose is? And I ask this because each school and each institution is different. They set their own rules as far as the minimum requirements. And I know offhand that most schools are going to ask you for a band 70, but there might be some that will require a band 60, yet others a band 80. So if you don't already know what your goal should be, I would really encourage you to find that out sooner than later. Because when you know exactly what score set you need to demonstrate, it helps you prepare and you'll understand better the types of skills that you'll need to study. I'll use the band 70 here as an example. It says adept. So somebody that earns a band 70 on their CAEL test, it means they've already got a very strong foundation in English language skill sets. They can communicate and be understood. They can understand the gist of what's happening with reading and listening, but there will be some limitations. So there might still be some areas that are a little weaker than others, and we're continuing to work on that. So in simple explanations, that's basically what your band 70 is, and it is an average score. But I will point out, if you look closely at the CAEL band scores, you notice they're all in even increments of 10. There are no half scores whatsoever in CAEL. So whatever score you get on the test would be rounded to the nearest 10. So again, band 70 is usually a good sort of average to aim for. So as we're talking about writing, let's focus on the writing sections today. So again, we're at sort of the end of the test, if you will, parts 4 and 5. So in part 4 that I mentioned earlier, this is where that essay question is going to come from, where you're using material from both the reading and listening passage you worked through to write that essay. So you can see the time here on the right-hand side. You're given just over an hour to complete that, as it takes time to write an essay. But in part 5, when you're just writing the paragraph, you're going to be asked on your test to use either the reading or the listening source to guide your details. And it's 1 paragraph. So it takes a lot less time to do that. So the time here is reflected, about 45 minutes or so for part 5. Okay, so a few features of the long writing, which we'll look at today. There is a minimum word count that you must achieve in order to score full marks. So 250 words is the minimum. You can certainly go over that if you have enough time and if you've got some interesting details. So don't worry about exceeding the word count minimum, but you do want to achieve it. And there is a word counter right on the screen that will guide you. So you'll know when you've written 250 words. You are given 35 minutes to complete this entire essay. And again, you have to use both the reading and the lecture there, the source materials, if you want to score full marks for the scoring here. So it's kind of like an essay. The short writing, on the other hand, the last question you do for CAEL, it's less than half the length. So 1 paragraph, 100 words minimum this time. You could go longer if you needed to, but it is 1 paragraph. Do not write more than 1 paragraph here. You will have about 10 minutes. So most people can get to about 100, maybe 120 words. That's about an average length there for 10 minutes. In the academic world, that would be probably about 7 or 8 complex sentences. So that's kind of what you're aiming for. And again, you only have to look at one of these sources, so it saves you time. The instructions will indicate whether they want you to consult the readings notes or the lecture notes. And it's usually just a comprehension question. You're answering one sort of focused idea based on either the reading or the lecture. Now, before you begin your writing, you're looking right now at the part 4 long writing. You can see that in the top left corner of your computer screen. This is what your computer looks like. So there's no timer on the screen, so it's just an instruction page. And during the whole test, you will be wearing a headset because that's, of course, how you'll complete the listening parts. So you will hear an automated voice read these instructions to you. So I'll read them out loud now just so you can familiarize yourself with what the instructions will say. So this one says to you, your professor asks you a question. You will write an answer on the next page. Use the information from the reading and lecture. Answer the question in your own words. This is really important. Try not to copy from the source. Use your own vocabulary when you can. And then it reminds you to write at least 250 words. And again, it will remind you of the time. You have 35 minutes to complete this task. So you'll notice that blue next button in the top right-hand corner of the screen. So as soon as these instructions are read to you and you're feeling confident and ready to start, you could click that next button and it will just move you to the official test. You can now see the timer at the top of the screen. So you start with 35 minutes and that's going to count backwards until it hits 0. So as soon as you see a timer, you know the test is on. Now, if you choose not to click next on that last screen, that's fine. You can sit and wait patiently for a few more seconds, and then the computer will automatically move you forward anyway. So that's how that works there. If you do finish typing and you can see, again, this is what the computer screen looks like. You've got your question sort of in the middle there on the right. That big white square at the bottom is where you type your answer. Now, some people, as they practice, will actually finish their entire essay, and they might even have some time left on the clock. So if you've checked your work and you're happy with it, again, you can click next and move on to part 5 a little more quickly. You don't have to sit and wait for this clock to get to 0. So you are in control, but I do want to caution you that once you click next, you can see for yourself there's no back button. So it would be too late to return and change your answer. You also do not get to carry with you extra time anyway. So again, next is just there to speed things along rather than wait impatiently for that timer to count back if you're done. So that's, you'll see the next button on every screen, by the way. You do have some tabs here to navigate between as well. So you notice that we are on the instructions page, which is why the instructions tab is white. It's like it's been clicked. And right below that in bulleted form, it reminds you about what we've just talked about. It will remind you, you have to use the reading and listening. You have to write 250 words and so on. So I think you're all going to know this information. I hope so, before you take the test. So I don't feel that you'll need to take your precious 35 minutes to read those instructions. I think it's pretty straightforward, as I say, as you're studying from home. But just know that that's where the instructions are in case you want to review and so on. You do have some writing features as well that you're welcome to click on if you want. So as you're typing, if you wanted to underline or bold words, you could use these features. They're not going to affect your score. But again, some of us are very comfortable using these features. So feel free to do that. And your word counter, as I mentioned, is going to be visible on screen. So double check you've achieved those 250 words there. And here's a question. I'll read it out to you just to give you a sense about the types of questions you'll encounter. And we'll be workshopping this one today. So it says, what factor do you think influences us the most when determining what and how we eat? So because this is your long writing question, you must address both the reading passage and the listening passage as well, which is side by side. So you can click on these two tabs and go back and forth between them as often as you need to. And your job is to pull details out of this reading passage and the lecture notes to answer the question. Now, remember, before you start writing this essay, you're already going to have completed the reading passage. So this one that says archaeology of food, you would be given 20 minutes to read this article through, and then there would be approximately 11 questions for you to answer. So you're already quite familiar with this reading passage before you even see the essay question. So it makes it faster for you just to skim over the details on screen and pull out the details you need to answer the question fully. Likewise with the listening passage, before you get to this essay question, you will have heard the lecture and answered about 11 questions based on that. So again, the material is fresh in your mind. The challenge though with the listening is that you cannot listen again to pull details out to answer this essay question. So when you click on the lecture notes tab, as you can see here, the computer displays for you a summarized outline of points that will, as you skim those over, they'll refresh your mind and you'll be able to remember, we hope, the main details from the lecture. And you can pull whichever details are relevant to the question. So that's how you would guide. You're not expected to know your background information about these topics. So do rely on the reading and listening notes there. Now, for each of you, again, if you do choose to take this test from your home computer, you cannot at home have anything on your computer workstation. You can't even have a pen or a piece of paper for security reasons. So if you do want to take notes to guide the writing, some people prefer that, you'll notice up here, there's a button that says Scratch Pad. So when you take the CAEL on your home computer, you do have to download the Prometric software that will allow you to take the test. And then within this platform is the Scratch Pad. You click that little button and it's going to pop open an online notepad. That's what Scratch Pad is. Think of it as a piece of paper, but instead of having it in front of you on your desk with a pen, you're going to have it in front of you on your computer screen. And you can type your ideas into this little box and keep it organized. And that can help you as you're typing in the whole essay. So this entire little Scratch Pad note box can be moved around your computer screen. You can minimize it or close it and open it up again if you need to. So again, this is your option if you choose to take notes from home. All right, so that's kind of the crash course in what the computer screens look like. I'm going to transition now into what academic writing looks like, and we'll get into some practice. So again, if you do have questions about the writing exercises, please let me know in the chat box and I'll answer them as we go. So strong academic writing has to identify the topic from the test first, and it has to address only the test question. We cannot ramble off on a different topic. It always has to be focused. We must make sure that we fully answer the question. And oftentimes in CAEL, you might almost have two parts to the question. So please read it carefully and make sure that you're giving as much detail to answer the entire question as you can. Again, we have to use details from the reading and listening sources that will be part of our score. And the more examples we can pull from the source material to support our essay topic, the better, the higher the score. Okay, now here's the sort of the mechanical part. And again, I know in different parts of the world, writing is taught differently. And I think we're all four of us are from different countries. So I would strongly recommend that you brush up on essay structure as it is taught and demonstrated here in Canada. There is definitely a structure to it. And I will show you an example today. But if you've never written an essay in this form, you're going to want to familiarize yourself with that before you actually book the test. So we do have to have different paragraphs. Every time you've got a new main idea, that's a different paragraph. We also want to include transition words that connect ideas together so everything runs smoothly. That's really important for every type of writing, academic writing as well. And because this is academic, it's higher level. So the more complex your sentence structure and your grammar is, the better your score is going to be. So please don't write just in these short, simple little sentences. You won't score as well. Academic writing is more complex than that. And we have Katarina joining us today. So welcome in. We're just talking about what academic writing looks like. Okay, your vocabulary choice as well needs to be formal, but also precise. So in academic writing, we do not use slang, casual expressions. We do not use idioms. We don't use very general, vague words like thing or stuff. We always aim to make our word choice very particular, very specific, and as interesting as possible to achieve that formal tone. And of course, all the grammar and spelling rules that we would learn for any type of communication is particularly important in academic writing. It's expected that we have fewer errors at this level because it is higher level. So I would say the big ones to really focus on to make sure you're doing them right definitely would be verb tense. That's a really important feature to get correct so your reader understands your points. Your subject-verb agreement is another one that's really going to help you for clarity, sentence fragments, and so on. There are lots and lots of rules that I hope you've been studying at home, but we will have a chance today to do some revisions and practice to find these errors. So we'll see how that goes. All right, we're going to start off with just a little true or false quiz just to see what you maybe already know about the long writing. And again, if you're new to CAEL and you're not sure, you can guess. It's okay to get these wrong. We're here to learn. So you can see the question on screen. It says, grammar is the most important part of the long writing. Would you say that is true or is that false? Do you want to guess in the chat box? Maybe just write T or F if you'd like. It's really up to you. Yeah. And then Omar, just so you know, right now your comments are great. I'm glad you're participating, but you're addressing your answers to just me, the host. If you want to change your settings in the Zoom chat to everyone, the other three ladies online can see what you have to say. So I thought I'd mention that in case you didn't know. Yeah. But Katerina and Anna and Prashant, what do you think? Anna's saying false. Omar's saying false. Thank you for doing that. Yeah. With such a small group, it's nice to share ideas. Katerina and Prashant, what do you think? Grammar is the most important part of the long writing. I'll give you 5 more seconds. We've got one for Prashant. And Katerina's in there too. You've all said false, and you're absolutely right. And I appreciate that Anna's given us a reason why it's false. And I agree. I just sort of ran down quickly some of the elements of academic writing. And you're right. Everything in balance is important. So it's not just the grammar and mechanics. It also has to do with, again, your vocabulary, your actual ideas and your content. Are you supporting your answer? Do you have lots of precise details so that we know that you know what you're talking about and so on? So grammar is important, yes, but it's not the only thing to focus on as you study. All right, let's do a second one. And this is a great question to think about. So contractions are those little short versions of words that are in the brackets here. So words like don't and it's. We're using the apostrophe and putting the T or the S after that. So can we use contractions in academic writing? So using contractions is acceptable. Would that be true or false? And it's kind of depends on what your teachers have told you in the past. I think back to all of my university studies, and I had teachers telling me different things, to be very honest. So that's partly why we're talking about this now. And as I can see in my Zoom chat box, you're all a bit divided as well. So believe it or not, on CAEL, it's acceptable to use the odd contraction, but you don't want to use them too often because you're right, it is definitely less formal. When we use these short forms, it makes the writing less formal than otherwise. So I was always trained in my university studies to never use them. So for academic writing, I still don't. That, to me, it feels safest to do that. But I'll let you know that if you do have the odd contraction now and then for the CAEL test, it's okay, it's acceptable. But as I mentioned, don't overdo it. Otherwise, you then start to become a little too casual. So that's maybe helpful to note. And here's another good one. So we talked about the length. You're writing an essay, but does your long writing piece have to be a 5-paragraph essay exactly? Would you say that's true or is that false? You know you've got 250 words to write as a minimum, but does it have to have a certain number of paragraphs, I guess, is what we're asking you. True or false? What do you think? And I've lost sight in my Zoom chat box. I can't remember where we left off from last time and where we're starting at. I think Prashant has just answered, but I can't remember offhand. So I'll go ahead and tell you. The good news is it's not a regimented test. There's no specific number of paragraphs you have to have. You definitely need, I would say you must have at least 3. And as Anna has helpfully said in the Zoom chat box here, it completely depends on the structure of your essay. So remember, every essay will have a short introductory paragraph. 1 to 3 sentences even, and it will just identify your main topic. That's the answer to the test question. So that's what the whole essay is about. That's your introductory paragraph, number 1. The middle paragraphs contain all of the examples and the details. So if you've got, say, 2 main ideas, you're going to have 2 middle paragraphs. If you have 3 main ideas you can think to discuss, you would have 3 middle paragraphs. So exactly right, Anna. It depends on the structure. And regardless of how many middle paragraphs you've got, you're still going to have a very short concluding paragraph. And on CAEL, honestly, it only has to be 1 to 2 sentences. It's not going to be long and grandiose like an academic essay in university. But yeah, so minimum 3 paragraphs. You might have 4, you might have 5 paragraphs. It always depends on those middle ones there. Yeah, so just as long as you're creating a new paragraph, every single time you've got a new main idea, that's really all that counts. So it's a nice note to make. Okay, now as far as the scoring goes, the raters, and right now, by the way, it's human raters that are reading your essay and your paragraph. And they're going to give you a score based on these exact skill sets. This is like a checklist, and you will receive this in your study pack. So we ask you to review it as you're studying at home. So the first 6 points here basically discuss how you're going to formulate your content. So again, number 1 is a given. Whatever the test question is about, we must identify our answer or our opinion about it right in that short introductory paragraph. And then again, numbers 2 and 3 here, the middle paragraphs are going to give those specific examples from your listening and from your reading sources. So whatever our examples are, we simply need to make sure we're expressing them as clearly as possible so the reader has no questions about what we're discussing. Everything should be laid out clearly for us. Number 4 is really important. I say it again, we have to answer the question fully. And number 5 is the length. So 250 words minimum, as the instructions ask. Number 6 is all about your ideas. We don't want to repeat the same idea throughout the whole essay. So again, 1 paragraph discusses 1 main idea. Your next paragraph will have a different idea. Don't talk in circles or ramble just to get the word count. That's not going to be helpful. So that's sort of just the general structure with the content. And these last 4 items here do discuss the source material. So again, we know we have to pull details from the reading and from the listening to support our ideas. We also need to do this in our own words. And this is the hard part. We don't want to just copy words right from the source because our vocab is important. Number 9, too, asks us to try to balance the ideas out. And this sometimes is hard too. So maybe think of pulling out 2 examples from the reading passage and 2 from the listening, or even 3 from reading and 2 from listening would be fine. What you don't want to do is have just 1 example from the reading source and about 3 from the listening. We try our very best to balance the source material to prove to the raters that we've understood all of it. And we'll get better scores that way too. So that's your content. Numbers 11 to 14 here are all about the structure. So again, your introduction clearly comes first. We should connect our ideas together with transition words. We'd like those transitions to be higher level and academic. So number 12 here gives you a couple of examples. So instead of just saying and, also, those words are quite simple. Think of using higher level transitions like these ones. Furthermore, in addition, and so on. It just sounds more academic. That's what you're trying to do. And again, we organize and make the ideas connect so we can follow them well through paragraph use. Language use at the bottom goes over, again, all of your mechanics. So your spelling, your grammar, your sentence structure, all of these elements will be assessed here. And of course, your vocabulary use still has to be academic and it has to make sense. Whatever words you use have to convey the right meaning, but also we hope that they have that academic tone. So all 3 of these main skill sets, your content, your structure, your language use, they're going to be looked at in their entirety. The raters will identify things you're doing very well from this entire checklist, all 19 skills here, and then they will identify your weaknesses and they'll balance them out. So if you've got just a few minor issues, it's not going to affect your score overly much. But if you've got some major omissions, then yes, it will have a negative effect. So again, when you study at home, just make sure that you're ticking the boxes from all 3 of these skill categories. Don't just focus on grammar, as we mentioned earlier. We still need to know how to structure the essay properly to get that well rounded score, if you want to call it that. So when you sit down to start this writing piece, of course, the first thing we're going to do, it's obvious, is we're going to read the question right on the computer screen. So I'm going to put the question up here so we can work with it today. And again, we've got 35 minutes, which feels like a long enough time, but we want to maximize our time typing the answer. So the faster you can identify the keywords from the question and understand what you're supposed to write about, the better. So can I give you about 10 seconds just to read the question again to yourself? And then I'm going to start circling some of these keywords that we need to really hone in on. But just take a moment to think it through first. Okay, it's a short question, so it doesn't take us long to read, but what we want to recognize immediately is that we are being asked to identify one factor only. This is so important. So if we were to, start talking about 2 or 3 different factors that we learned about in the reading passage, let's say, we'd be off topic already. So this is what factor. That means pick one. It's up to you. You can pick any factor that was discussed in the reading or listening, but you must select one factor that you think, again, this is totally up to you. If, say, all 4 of you are writing the test, you all might have a different factor, and that's perfectly fine. It's just a matter of then supporting that factor as being the best one. So what factor do you think, in your opinion, influences us, meaning people today, the most? This is important too. The most. So of all the factors that are mentioned in the reading and the listening, you're absolutely going to need to pick the one you feel influences people today the most. And it has to do with a double topic, if you will. So we have to figure out both how and what we eat. So it's kind of a fun topic. It is talking about food, but there's going to be one factor that influences what and how we eat. So whatever one you feel does that the best is the one you're going to talk about as the focus of your question. All right, so that's what that's all about. So we do have to read the question carefully, as we just did. Immediately, you don't want to spend 5 minutes just trying to figure out which factor you're going to talk about. Very, very quickly, you're going to come up with your own opinion, which in this case is identifying that one factor from either the reading or listening. I would recommend for this longer essay that you make a quick outline. So using the online scratch pad, or perhaps a piece of paper and pen in a testing center. What I would do is skim over. So remember that reading passage and the lecture notes you can flip back and forth with on your computer screen. So skim read those and pull out all of the relevant details that are going to help you formulate your opinion and support it. So whatever makes sense, you're going to just jot down a couple of ideas there. Always using point form. So just a few words listed from the top of your page to the bottom is usually most helpful. You don't have to worry about spelling, grammar, or neat handwriting in your notes. Your notes or your outline is there just to guide the organization of your essay. So I would even say, honestly, 3 to 4 minutes would probably be better. You do not want to spend more than 5 minutes just thinking and organizing your thoughts. Otherwise, you cut into the writing time. So again, you do have to make a quick decision and understand which details you're going to use from the source material to guide the writing. So what I'll do is I'll quickly just sort of scroll through. This is the reading passage that we would use here if we were answering this test question. So it's archaeology of food. So you'll have a decent sense of how long the passage is, how many paragraphs there are, and you can sort of see as well that the sentences are longer and more complex. All right, so while we're doing that, I'm going to run down some of the useful details in this long reading passage. So of course, the title said archaeology of food. So we know this whole article is about food. The first paragraph of a reading passage is going to give you the entire bent of the whole article. So you can maybe even skim read that first paragraph again to get your mind around what was discussed. And again, you can see all the different paragraphs here on screen. So every single paragraph has a different main idea. And oftentimes it's the first sentence of the paragraph that will tell you the main idea. So that's what I like to do, is quickly read over the first sentences and get my mind together around what I'm going to discuss. So pull out only the details that answer the question. So in this case, you're looking for one factor and how many examples are there that will support that it influences how and what we eat. So that's what you're doing during this process, right? Only details that support your main ideas will be helpful. Again, here's a closer look at the lecture notes. So you can see that the main ideas are included first beside the bulleted points. And then sort of underneath a lot of these main points, you've got subheadings. So they will give you those specific examples that the raters like to see. So of course, we start with the title. This one's also about food. That's what the whole question asks us to talk about. So this is food rituals in the past and present. All right, so again, main ideas, look at the bulleted points. Sometimes you've got definitions, so those are helpful for you to review. Again, only details that answer the question. Whatever factor you've selected, those are the only details that you're looking for now. You will not use all of these details to answer the question, just the relevant ones. So again, 4 minutes, no more than 5 to pull those details out. Okay, and when you make an outline on your piece of paper or on Scratchpad, this is just sort of like a standard outline format. So your introduction for CAEL is short, one to 3 sentences max. You can begin to introduce the topic. This one's about food. So you might want to think about an interesting fact that you know about food. It can be taken from the article or even from something you know about food is fine. But immediately after that, you must state, in this case, identify the factor that has the greatest influence on how and what we eat. That is your opinion, and it must be stated in that short introduction up top. Okay, and then your main ideas are guiding those middle paragraphs. So you're going to have a reason to select whatever factor you did. So you'd identify that reason. And in that same paragraph, you'd have a couple, probably at least 2, maybe even 3, supporting examples from the source material. Again, you might have a second reason why you've chosen that factor as the greatest influence on how and what we eat. And again, you're pulling out details there from the source. Some people might have a third main idea, and that's fine. But even having 2 middle paragraphs is fine as well. And then a conclusion. So again, 1-2 sentences maximum can sort of summarize your point. I myself like to leave the reader with something more to think about. So you can always make a prediction about what might happen next. So throughout this whole essay, you've discussed a factor that influences what we eat today. You might want to look ahead to the future and predict if that same factor will continue to influence us or not. And that would be an effective way to close something like this. Just a final thought or 2. Doesn't have to be long. All right, so let's really get into the introduction. Your introductory statement. Again, 1 sentence, maybe 2, introduces the topic and gets the reader's attention. That's all you're trying to do. Remember, this whole topic we're focusing on is about food. So the same questions up top there. What factor do you think influences us the most when determining how and what we eat? So I've got 4 different introductory statements below. Can I give you approximately 30 to 40 seconds? Can you quickly skim read these over? And in the Zoom chat box, let me know which letter you feel makes the best introductory statement. One here's definitely the best, and I'm curious to see if you can find it. So I'll give you some time to work that through. Okay, so we've got Prashant's already made a selection. Let's see if we can get the other 3 in here. And again, don't worry if your answer is not quite right. We will talk about which one's the best and also why. So Omar and Anna both select C. Okay, so now we have a couple of different ideas, and I'm not sure Katerina is with us. We'll maybe give her another 10 seconds and then we'll move on. All right. Okay, Katerina has privately messaged me, so you can't see her answer, but she's also selected B. So you're split. 2 of you think B, 2 of you think C. So what I'm going to do is remove A. So nobody chose this, and I'm glad you didn't. This particular example is very templated. It's very general. So again, food is an important topic nowadays. Can you see how general that is? You're not really saying much. And then the rest of it just sounds, again, so almost like you've memorized it from somewhere else. It is an indisputable fact that humans all around the world enjoy food every day. Yeah, it doesn't really tell us much. It's got some interesting words, sure, but it just sounds too general and too fabricated or too memorized, maybe. So it's not A. Believe it or not, it's not B. And the reason for that is because it actually doesn't answer the topic. So this part B says there's a common saying that health is wealth. So in other words, being healthy is the most valuable thing in life. As nutrition is vital to health, we must make responsible dietary choices. So this topic is completely different from the question at the top of your screen. We're being asked in this CAEL test question to pick one factor and describe how it influences what we eat. Whereas again, in exercise B or example B, if you were to write this way, your whole essay would then be to try to convince somebody to choose their food wisely. So you can see that even though both examples talk about food, the focus is different. So B does not answer the question, and that's why it's not correct. D is the other false statement here, and that's simply because it's copied directly from the question. Although we may not always be aware of them, many factors influence us when determining how and what we eat. So that statement's correct. The meaning is correct. But as you can see, the vocab is almost identical to the question. So this is not the best way to go. That's why we've X'd it out. So some of you chose C, and you're absolutely correct. Prehistoric humans likely wouldn't recognize much in the modern world. So that's your intro, kind of your hook to get the reader interested. But archaeological findings show that their methods of obtaining and preparing food are still with us today. So we are talking here, when we talk about obtaining and preparing food, we are introducing the notion that we will be discussing how and what we eat. And we've, again, cleverly hooked the reader's attention by introducing food and archaeological findings. So this is a really great way to introduce. It's one way to do it. There are many, but that's a great one to do it. Okay, so we'll put that up on screen. We'll pretend that that's our introductory statement. And then right after you've got your introduction, we understand we're talking about food and sort of obtaining and preparing it. We then have to identify the actual factor that mostly or has the greatest influence on how and what we eat. So that's the topic. We have to state our view. So let's try this again with the true or false. We'll see how it goes. When you give your opinion, so in this case, it's the factor, do you absolutely have to include phrases like these? In my opinion, or I believe. Do you have to do it that way? Would you say that's true or false? Is it mandatory? In my opinion, I believe, my opinion is, and so on. Does it have to be something like that? What do you think? All right, some of you are saying true. I'm here to give you some good news that this is false. You can use these, absolutely you can. And I think a lot of us are taught to do it this way because it very clearly identifies our opinion. Okay, so you could absolutely do that. So here's one example. This is correct. You could say, of the wide variety of factors that influence modern eating choices and habits, my opinion is that agriculture is the most significant. So I guess the factor would be agriculture, but my opinion is this is perfectly fine. So if that's how you want to identify your opinion, please continue to do that. But I'm here to tell you, you don't have to do it that way. This is also correct. Of the wide variety of factors that influence modern eating choices and habits, agriculture is the most significant. So it says the same thing. It's just removed those words about your own opinion. So again, you get to choose. That's the good news of English. Sometimes, anyway, you've got some choice and they both make absolute sense. So please choose the method that suits your own writing style. But yeah, CAEL it's strict in some ways. Like there are certain skills you have to demonstrate, but it's looser in others. It's nice to know that there are a variety of approaches, I guess, to the question too. All right, I'm going to place 4 words here, again, talking about presenting your opinion statement. So here are 4 phrases. In my view, according to me, I opine, and I would argue. So 2 of these are not correct. We should not be using them to identify our opinions. Can you identify the 2 that we would not be using? Not ever. in the academic world in English. Two of them are wrong. Which are the two that are wrong? What do you think? All right, so far I'm looking here. Okay, we've got a couple of different guesses. We got A, B, C, D, and C, D. Okay. All right, we're waiting on Omar. Omar's missing. Missing in action. Omar, what do you think? Which two would you avoid? Or let me rephrase that. Which two should you avoid? This is the better way to ask that question. And the reason I'm asking this is because in a lot of different sample test questions that I've reviewed that different test takers have written, these are very common expressions we see in people's writing. So we wanted to make sure people know, first off, okay, you've all clocked in your ideas. We do not use be, and I think Anna, you're the only one that chose that. So good for you. You got that right. We never ever say according to me. That's very common. I hear that expression a lot from people living more in places like India. And so I think sometimes as well, depending on where we grew up, and different expressions might be used in different parts of the world. And that's what makes it a bit tricky. But at least here in Canada and in English, we just don't use this expression, period. I can't even tell you why. It's just not done. We'd understand what you're trying to say if you said according to me, but please don't use this, not ever, not for the CAEL test, not for any type of communication here. Okay, yeah. And the other one that you should never, ever use is this one. I opine. This is a very old-fashioned word. Once upon a time, it was used very commonly, but this word has fallen out of use. It's what we call outdated, and it makes it sound very unnatural. So please never, ever use this word, I opine. All right, it's just people will raise their eyebrows and kind of wonder where you got that word from and why you're using it. It doesn't really make sense anymore. You could use, in my view, in my opinion, I would argue, and there are, of course, many other expressions you might use, but these are two that we've crossed out that are just, they're commonly demonstrated by other CAEL test takers. So I thought it was nice just to mention these here to have you strike those from your memory in case you're using them now. So we don't want to fall into that trap. All right. I think it's wise to just have one or two expressions in your own memories. So when you come into CAEL, you know you're writing an opinion essay. So just pick an expression that works for you and maybe just use it on all of your practice for now, whether it's in my view or in my opinion, or I would argue. Those are three really good ones to memorize, and that way you can just use them in any situation and it would be fine. Okay, so here's our completed introduction that we've spliced together our introductory statement and then our factor, which is agriculture being the most significant influence on us. So just to sort of sum up what our introduction has done, as you can see for yourself, there are only two sentences there. And yes, the sentences are a little bit longer because they're more complex for academics, but this is about the length. This is a really good length to be writing. Two sentences, no more than three for your introduction here. So again, the introductory statement comes first, talking about food and preparing food still today, etc., and then getting right into agriculture being the greatest influence on us. That's all we need to do for the intro. Okay, it's one of the shortest parts of the essay, but I argue it's probably the most important because if you express it clearly, like this example shows you, the reader has 100% certainty about what the rest of the essay is going to be. So when I look at this, I can expect as a reader that the writer here is going to give us lots of examples to prove that agriculture has the greatest effect about how and what we eat. That's what we've set this up to say. All right, so here's the first middle paragraph. We call this the body paragraph. Can I give you just about 20 seconds here? Can you skim it through quickly? There are some strengths, some really great things happening, but there are also some weaknesses. So feel free to comment in the chat box if you notice an example of either. But just take about maybe 30 seconds just to skim it over. We'll see how it goes here. All right. So if I can maybe start us off, I know this is tough to just sort of on the spot think about strengths and weaknesses. So why don't I start us off there? The topic sentence itself does state that agriculture is responsible for food that we eat. So I'll just maybe highlight that in yellow for us. So you can see that. Whoops. Okay. So firstly, it's a fact that almost every single thing we eat is a food that is produced through agriculture. So again, that first sentence, we understand agriculture is responsible for what we eat. So this is the topic sentence or the focus. This is a great thing to do to let the reader know what this paragraph will discuss. The rest of the information here does provide examples of different types of animals. So you can see them mentioned like cows and sheep and chicken. So that was taken from either the reading or listening passages. It does also list the crops that we eat. So things like wheat and barley and corn. It even goes into how we store the food, like ceramic jars and so on. And then which really hits on the topic of how and what we eat. So these are definitely some strengths to mention. Did you see the first word there that starts this paragraph is firstly. So a transition telling us this is idea number one. I think that's a great way to go. And a lot of the vocab here is quite academic. As I take a quick skim read, I see words like harvested, worldwide, ceramic jars, even granaries and such. So there's definitely quite a bit of academic vocabulary, and the raters will love that. That will help the score for sure. Most of the grammar is accurate, but not all. So we're going to make a couple of quick revisions or improvements here. So again, here's that topic sentence that I read to you out loud. I'm going to remove the rest of the paragraph from the screen so we can just focus on our topic sentence here. So let's see if we can answer this question. So which of the following is true about this sentence that is showing on screen? So I've got 4 different statements again, and we're going to see if we can pick the right one, multiple choice style. So A, the main idea is unclear. There's a grammar mistake. There are unnecessary words, or the information is off topic. So which of these statements, of these 4 on the screen, are true? You might want to reread that sentence to yourself, but do you want to put in the Zoom chat box if you had to pick one that's true? And this is what we're going to fix, by the way. This is the one little tiny weakness. This is a good first attempt, but we can make it even better if that helps. So the mistake is noticeable, but it's not a huge one. So you're so close. Yeah, this one is, there are actually just some unnecessary words. So the topic about being agriculture, being the factor influencing what we eat, the topic's there. So we understand that. It's just that there are some unnecessary words we can remove to make this a little bit more concise and academic. So there's our sentence. If we just took a red pen and started crossing out words that don't really help give us the necessary details, I would first cross this out. Firstly, almost every thing we eat is produced through agriculture. So let's just get our minds around that. I'll put the sort of revised version. We'll take out those crossed off lines side by side. So can you see what I mean? In that first example, firstly, it is a fact that almost every single thing we eat is a food that is produced through agriculture. That is 20 words long. And by removing those crossed off phrases, we haven't changed the meaning. It still says, firstly, almost everything we eat is produced through agriculture. 9 words. We've literally almost reduced in half the number of words there, but the meaningful content still exists in our revised version. So we want to just get right to the facts. And in academic writing especially, we want to remove words that do not add value to what we're talking about. This is a really important skill, and it's hard. It's called concision. So when you get right to the facts, you are writing in a very concise manner. And again, this is it's a pretty high level skill for academics, but it really improves the quality of your writing. So we avoid redundancy. Redundancy just means, again, when I look to the crossed off version, when we say every single thing, it's not necessary to say single because we've already said every. So we understand that you do mean every single thing. That's what redundancy is. It's sort of stating the same idea, just in different ways. So when we can write concisely, like in 9 words above, what we're doing is expressing the important details and we're not wasting our words. Remember, we have to write 250 words for CAEL, but we want to make sure all the words and ideas we include pack a really powerful punch for idea and content. That's what our aim is to do. So try not to waste those precious word counts with ideas that don't add any value to the writing. Anyway, there's our revised first sentence up top. It's nice and short now, as you can see. So I've highlighted that second yellow sentence because we have a little problem with it that I'd like to go through with you and fix. This one's easier to fix. Can you see what some of the mistakes are? Technically, there are 3 mistakes here, and these are more related to the grammar and the mechanics of writing. So they're easier to spot. We're not really looking at the wording or the content right now. Can you give me at least one little tiny grammar mistake? I think 2 of them are obvious, but the third one maybe not so much. Okay, Omar and Katerina, yeah, really quick on the draw. Thanks for doing that. Yeah, immediately, I noticed that too. Of course, I'm an English teacher and I've been teaching a long time, so I notice these things quickly, but I want you to notice them quickly too. This is a very common mistake. What we're trying to say is sheep, like plural sheep. We don't need that apostrophe S. You don't use an apostrophe when you're trying to make it plural. So that's wrong. What else is wrong? Can you look at, there's 2 more things. There's a little transitional word that's missing, and then the end punctuation needs to be revised as well. So do you see right now, it just says cows, sheeps, chickens. What's missing between the word sheeps, chickens? We can't just list 2 words like that side by side in a list. Yeah, Anna's got it for us. Great, thank you. Yeah, so we have to, this is a rule, we have to use the word and right before that last item in the list. So it's okay to say cow, sheep, but because chickens is the last item, we have to say cow, sheep, and chickens. So that's just a very small revision to make, but it really helps. And you're right, Katerina, we should be putting a comma before that word and as well. I agree with you. The last thing that you may be noticing now as you're looking, this little dot, 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 we call that an ellipsis. And the only time we use an ellipsis is when we're leaving the reader wondering. Like dot, dot, dot sort of means to be continued. And it's a casual structure. You wouldn't do that in academic writing. So we simply just want to replace that with a period. That would definitely be the best way. So the quick revision we make at the bottom, you can see in blue. You've got cows, comma, sheep. The plural of sheep is sheep, which is an exception. We actually don't even put an S there, which I know is strange, but English is like that sometimes. So sheep, comma, and chickens, period. Right? So again, if you'd have written like it was up top, the readers would notice those mistakes. These are not major mistakes. So even though we notice them, we can still understand your idea. So they're not going to have a huge impact on your score. But if you make lots of little mistakes like that all the way through, they are going to start to add up. And they will eventually, interfere with the score just a little tiny bit there under the language use. So to the best of our ability, these are the little tiny skill sets we want to be on the lookout for when you check your work, and fix them if you can, so that you've got as many correct structures there as you possibly can. Anyway, we've corrected those errors, and that would be that first highlighted sentence in yellow. I've continued the highlight with that next sentence, and even though the sentence itself is correct with content and grammar, what I think we can do is combine these 2 ideas together to make a more complex structure. Because that second sentence says, these are the same animals we use for meat and eggs today. It's a little bit on the simple side. So if we really want to go for the complex structures, let's see if we can fix them somehow. So there are definitely a couple of ways we can combine these sentences, and I'll quickly show you one method. So instead of just creating those 2 sentences as they exist, you can see down below here, after the word chickens, instead of ending there, we can put a comma and just put in which are the same animals we use for meat and eggs today. So rather than start a new sentence with, these are the same animals, we've combined all ideas into one sentence, and we have created a complex structure this way. So this would be an improvement. Or another fancier way to do this, I don't know if you've used this structure before. So again, after that first sentence, after the word chickens, instead of just ending with a period, you could use this colon, the dot dot. You can see it's been highlighted yellow for you. And when we use a colon, we're basically defining or explaining the term preceding it. So chickens, we're saying, are the same animals we use for meat and eggs today. But when you use that colon, you don't need to worry about adding in other words to it. It's just the straight up definition afterwards. So again, you're playing around with the structures a little bit. So either version on the bottom, it's a minor correction, but you've now created some complex, varied sentence structures that are a step above what we started with, right? So again, just to summarize, what we started with up top is acceptable and it's correct, but what we've revised it in the bottom is even better. So it's kind of like step one, step two. And eventually, the more you practice your academic writing, we hope you can get to step two on your own and really impress the raters with everything you know about sentence structure and so on. Anyway, we'll move on. This is our next little sentence that we want to look at. So it says, they farmed and harvested crops like wheat, barley, corn, and rice. These are still the most famous grains worldwide. So let's isolate that sentence here. And there is, again, a little multiple choice. So one of these statements is going to be true. Let's see if we can find it. Do you see a grammar mistake there? Is there a word choice error? Is it something to do with the tone? Like, is it too casual or slang? Or is there off-topic information? So what is true? Only one of these statements is true about that sentence or the sentences. Ouch. What do you think? Okay, some guesses are coming in. Katarina is going with B, the word choice. Okay, good. Now, if you think there's a word choice error, I challenge you to tell us what word is wrong. So let's back it up with evidence here. And Omar, same thing. Okay, Omar thinks there's a word choice. So both of you chose B. Is there one word there that stands out to you as something that's just not quite right? We'll see what you think of while we're waiting for the other two. So Anna and Prashant, what are you thinking here? Is it really a word choice? Maybe there's a grammar. Maybe there's something off topic. What do you think? Prashant's going with C with the tone. Okay. And do we still have, and Anna's going with D. Interesting. So we've chosen most of the ideas. Okay. Well, only one of them is right. So let's identify the one that is right. And it actually is B. Believe it or not, there's a word choice error. I can almost see why you might have said, oh, maybe there's a tone issue. These sentences as they stand are a little bit simple. So you're right, they don't quite have that same high-level academic tone, but they're still acceptable. They're still using accurate information, etc. So yeah, we don't have enough evidence of slang or idiomatic or casual language to say that our tone is off. Yeah, it's not a tone thing. It is a word choice error, and there is one word. Nobody's given it to me yet, so I'm going to identify it for you. The word mistake here is this one. Grains themselves cannot be famous. That connection of ideas just doesn't really make sense. So the word famous, as we use it regularly in English, always refers to something that many people around the world know about and love. It's often, it could be a person, like a famous celebrity. Pick your famous actor or your famous singer. It could be like a painting, like the Mona Lisa. It could be a building, like the Eiffel Tower, etc. So famous always relates to worldwide, well-known objects that people usually look at in a very positive light. But grains are just common foods that we eat that are farmed. So it just doesn't seem to match. That's not really what famous is all about. So there are lots of words we could replace the word famous with. And again, it's totally up to you to select a word that does make sense. Do any of you have a suggestion just for fun? Instead of saying these are still the most famous grains, we're speaking about wheat, barley, corn, and rice. What word can you think of that would be better than famous? Just be a little more accurate. Recognized, I like, by Omar. Yeah. Best, close for Sean, but I still think if you said the most widely recognized or the most widely known, I think that would be a little more accurate than best. Because again, best means you're ranking them from best to worst. And wheat, barley, corn, and rice, they're not really being ranked in that regard. So it's not quite the same thing, but I understand where you're going with that. Likewise, Katarina, popular, same thing. Popular is just not quite the right connotation. Again, you're both alluding to something that's just very well known around the world. So in fact, you could say well known. Or common. Actually, common was the first one I thought of. So I think that would be the more accurate word choice instead of saying best and so on. But yeah, the most common grains worldwide or widespread, it's kind of capturing that it's, again, the most widely known. Prevalent, that's a really fancy word that even I didn't think of until I saw my list again. I forgot about it. Prevalent just means, again, it's most widely known, but we're trying to really go for some interesting word choice. Ubiquitous. This is a hugely high-level academic word. And what ubiquitous means is that it's omnipresent or everywhere. All over the world, people know about these grains. Or you can go with something a little bit more commonly popular. Now, eaten, the word eaten, Anna, is actually part of a verb. So the reason we can't use eaten is because the word we're replacing is an adjective. It has to describe the grains. So we could incorporate eaten into this. You might say, these are still the most, and again, pick any word that makes sense. I went with common just for fun. You could say these are still the most common grains eaten worldwide. I don't know if that sounds better or worse, but do you see what I mean? We can't use eaten instead of famous because they're two different parts of the sentence. Yeah, I kind of like it just with the way it is, just with the adjective, the most common grains worldwide, or the most prevalent grains worldwide, and so on. So you can play around with the vocab. But yeah, famous just doesn't quite have the right connotation behind it. Anyway, here's our corrected sentence. We went with common grains, although as you saw, there were other choices we could have made. But believe it or not, there are still a couple of weaknesses that we need to fix. And in order to do that, I'm going to show you. Here's a little part from the long reading passage. So the very first sentence that we've got on the left here says they farmed and harvested crops like wheat, barley, corn, and rice. That's the first sentence we came up with. And I'm going to highlight in the reading source, check this out. They farmed and harvested crops like wheat, barley, corn, and rice. So that entire first sentence we've included in our essay has been copied word for word from the long reading. So please do not do this. Do not do this. So don't just copy, use your own language. And again, both of these sentences here now on the left, the wording now makes sense, but they're both very simple. So once again, let's look at how we can paraphrase or rewrite that first sentence to make it more of our own language. And then we're going to combine these two sentences together. So instead of saying they farmed and harvested, because that was copied right from the question, you just have to come up with your own wording, your own verb. So instead of they farmed and harvested, could we say they grew crops, or they cultivated crops, or even they produced crops? So this is showing our own vocab, which is what we want to do. Now, the list of crops are accurate since we've taken them from the source. But when we're paraphrasing in our own words, we don't have to include every single example from that source material. So I would maybe choose one or two rather than list all four, just to make it a little bit different and to get to our point a little more quickly is all. So that's maybe what I would do there. All right. Now to combine these ideas together, I'll point out that when we say crops up top, down below there, when we say these are still the most common grains. So both words, crops and these, are referring to the crops listed in the middle of our sentences there. So one relatively easy way to get around that and combine them, we're going to shorten it a little bit, but this would be an improvement here on the right. When we say the crops they grew, including rice and wheat, are still the most common grains worldwide. So we're getting right to our point. We're using our own vocabulary, and we're also combining those sentences together. So we've got a longer, more academic tone. So again, on the left was correct-ish. Wasn't great, but at least we got the meaning. That's step one. Step 2 on the right is definitely your next step up when you're looking at ways to improve the writing further. So let's insert that in, and we're almost done now. All right, this whole next yellow section we can work with says, and they had more food than they can eat immediately. It's necessary to make some stuff to keep it fresh, like ceramic jars for small quantities and granaries for large ones. So let's isolate that sentence there. And there are actually quite a few errors here and weaknesses. So I'll give you just a little bit of time. We won't take too long, even 10 or 15 seconds. Can you point out maybe at least one thing here you would change? I believe there are four tiny little elements we could improve upon. But let's see if you can find at least one before I show you where they are. Mm-hmm. Can I give you a little helping hand? I know this is tricky. So in academic writing and in most writing, we don't start with the word and. The word and, by the way, is really simple anyway. So for academics, I wouldn't start with it to begin with. There are other ideas we'll think of in a second. Yeah, don't use the word and unless you can't think of anything else. I'm guessing that you might have missed this. This is a very common mistake. So I circled it. These are both verb tense errors. And what we have to do when we're writing, you notice how we started off in past tense? They had, that's past tense, more food than they can eat. This is present tense. It's not, or it's necessary. This is present tense again. So we can't, for no good reason, start going past, present, and so on. So we want to keep our verb tenses consistent. So these should actually be past tense. And it looks like Omar got that right when I circled it. Yeah, could and was, exactly. So that's a very, very common mistake we see often. So that's why I'm bringing that to your attention. The hardest mistake to find, and I'm not surprised nobody noticed this by themselves, is this tiny little comma is wrong. What we have here are two distinct sentences. And we know that because they each have their own subject and verb. There's the subject and the verb. This would be it was necessary. Well, it becomes the new subject and was is the new verb. So whenever you've got your own subject and verb, you can't just combine those sentences together with a comma. There are different ways to connect them, which we'll look at next. But this is one of the more serious mistakes to make in English. Have you ever written or even read something from someone else where like one sentence is about 5 lines on the page? If we just cram and combine so many ideas together with all of these commas, it really overwhelms the human brain. So we have to end our sentences to make the reader understand where the ideas finish and then where the next one continues. So that is a major mistake, and it's going to affect your writing if you do it too often. Here's one I'm surprised you didn't get based on the practice we just finished doing. Make some stuff. Please don't use the word stuff. Don't use the word thing either. They tell us nothing. Very non-academic, very general, and so on. So let's fix these mistakes, make it a lot better. So rather than and, we could go with also. I don't love that word either. I still think it's a bit plain. I like words like this, furthermore, or moreover, or even in addition, or additionally. So any of these suggestions would be 100% better than just saying and. So pick one. Honestly, it doesn't matter which one, just pick one. So all we've done is replace and with furthermore below. That was relatively straightforward. Let's move on to those two verb tense errors that Omar helped us fix. So these should definitely be past tense, and Omar's done that for us in the chat box. So they could, and it was. Excellent. So everything's in past tense. So let's clear that. This one will take a bit of thinking. To make some stuff. Stuff tells us nothing. So let's really play around here. So I've made a little chart, if you will. So rather than make is okay, but we could do better, I think. Do you see the list of words below? Any of those words mean to make, but they're more interesting. So I think if we used one of those words instead, it would be an improvement. Produce, invent, develop, create, design, anything like that would work. You could use some, You might want to shy away from it though and come up with different wordings. So various, a variety of, they mean the same thing. This is the hard part. Rather than just say some stuff, we have to come up with an idea. So what is it that we're using to keep the food fresh? Could we suggest that we've got storage containers like ceramic jars or storage receptacles or storage vessels? Any of those ideas would connect really nicely. So the whole sentence looks like this. Furthermore, they had more food than they could eat immediately. It was necessary to create various storage containers to keep it fresh, like ceramic jars and so on. Much more academic and interesting there in that bottom example than looking at the top, make some stuff, which is too general. And to fix this pesky little run-on sentence, all we have to do is break it into two sentences or add a word to connect them. It's an either-or approach. If you make two sentences, though, remember it's just not as complex. So it's probably better to add a word there to connect these ideas together. So it's just a matter of understanding how these sentences connect. So if we say, on the one hand, they had more food than they could eat immediately, and then we say, it was necessary to create various storage containers to keep it fresh. I can understand immediately that this is a cause and effect situation. So we have to select a word that signifies cause and effect. We could go with because, we could go with as, you could even say since. So again, you got choice, right? So you can play with the words a wee bit here. So furthermore, as they had more food than they could eat immediately, it was necessary to create various storage containers to keep it fresh and so on. So this is all one sentence now, and we fixed all of the other little mistakes. So bit by bit, and here's our last sentence. Modern societies use the same methods to ensure steady access to agricultural products, even in seasons when those items can't be produced. There is one major mistake here. It's a high level mistake. Can you recognize it? What's wrong with this sentence? Major mistake. And these are the types of mistakes that you need to be able to find in your own writing, all by yourself. I'm going to identify it for you. Do you know what a fragment is? Even in seasons when those items can't be produced. This is sort of a half of a sentence. It's half of an idea. A sentence fragment is missing either the subject or what we call the predicate, which is the completed idea. So to fix it, what you want to do is just connect the fragment on to the other part of the sentence. This is actually an easy fix once you recognize that that last sentence is incomplete. So instead of making a separate sentence, all we need to do here is after the word products, change that period to a comma, and then just continue the sentence. So we no longer need a capital letter E. So these types of mistakes, once you've recognized them, are relatively easy to fix, but you are helping your reader understand your ideas so much better because, again, the ideas flow and it makes it all smooth. So just to summarize, I won't read this all out to you now as you'll get this in your study pack anyway, but this is the entire paragraph here that we've worked through. And we've color-coded it to help you identify the different structures. So remember, this is the first body paragraph, the middle paragraph. So our main idea is in orange at the top. So we're focusing on agriculture as the main topic here. We've got three distinct details. In blue, it's what we eat. So some of those animals mentioned. Another detail in yellow is, again, what we eat. This time it's all about crops. And that third detail, we're building on all the other details suggested. You can see that word furthermore tells you that. But what it's doing here is it's describing the impact on how we eat as well, because we're talking about how to store the food. And this is what the entire test question is asking us to do. So which factor influences how and what we eat? So it's a very high level answer to this question. Okay, for this next little paragraph, we won't take as much time to go through it. And as a matter of fact, we're going to build it from the beginning instead of working it through as a finished product. So we're starting a new topic, and you know that because you see this, where it says secondly. So that's a giveaway. So this says, secondly, agriculture is strongly connected to rituals, as the lecturer explained. So of course, we're still talking about agriculture because that's the one factor that we've chosen to guide the entire piece of writing here. But this paragraph now, as you can see, is going to discuss rituals that influence, I guess, how we eat. And by mentioning the lecturer, what we're doing is telling the raters, we're pulling details from the listening passage. So throughout your CAEL writing, if and when you discuss the reading source, you can refer to it in several different ways. You might just say, according to the long reading passage, or the reading tells us, or the reading text. So there are different ways to introduce that. Or like this one, for listening, you might talk about the long listening or the lecture or the lecturer, etc. But there's one little tip, I guess, that I should share. And this is complex and hard to remember. But when you are talking about a listening passage, like this here, the lecturer, notice the verb tense. The verb tense is past tense. The lecturer stated or described or explained, and then you continue with the idea. So we use the past tense when we discuss the listening content because you've already heard the lecture and it's finished. That's why we're using past tense. But the reading passage uses the present tense, states, describes, explains, or what have you. And the reason for that is because your reading passage is still in front of you and you're still working through it in the present moment. I know that's a really fine-tuned detail. Don't stress too much if you forget which verb tense to use. It's not really going to affect your score too much. But I thought I'd just introduce this notion to you now if you wanted to start to try to practice that on your own. So again, the listening's already finished, so we're using past tense. The reading is in front of us as we look at the passage, so we're using present tense. So that's a very fine-tuned. That's about step 3 for people that have practiced a lot of academics and they're ready to move on to that level. So we'll leave that with you for now. Don't worry about it too much right now. Anyway, here's again the opening to our second paragraph about rituals. So once we've introduced rituals with the lecturers explaining here, we've got some ancient rituals arose as a direct result of farming, such as, so here's where you go to the lecture notes right on your CAEL computer screen. You click that lecture notes tab and this is what you see. So because we're discussing rituals and we're looking for examples of rituals from farming, your job right now is to skim read quickly through the lecture notes to see if you can find any examples of rituals used for farming. So what I'd ask you to do is look at the lecture notes to the left and just let your eyes fall over the screen. You're scanning for words like rituals, farming, etc. You're looking for the right section in the lecture notes where you can pull details. I will give you 10 seconds to find it on your own, and then I will box it for you so you can see it easily. Look at your headings. This is what I would do. I would look just at the headings. Food, group, food, rituals. Okay, great, but this isn't about farming per se. Animal food, rituals, crop, harvest. Yes, harvest is like farming. So that would be a really good spot to look at. So that's about how quickly, right? I saw the word rituals, animal food rituals, so I thought that would be helpful. And then my eyes landed on crop harvest, and that has to do with farming. So again, that's how we know that this detail would be very useful. So I would just sort of pause there and look at ways that we could insert. This is from the lecture notes. We want to just insert that information into the writing, but we want to do it in our own ways, our own words, I mean. So some ancient rituals arose as a direct result of farming, such as the Inca sacrificing animals to their gods in exchange for bountiful crops. So that would be one way. I mean, the word sacrificing is sort of like offering those llamas up from the lecture notes. And again, llamas and alpacas were mentioned in the lecture notes. We don't have to copy word for word. So if we just went with animals to their gods in exchange for bountiful crops is a good way to rephrase ensuring food security with good crop harvest. So again, there's a million ways you could reword that in your own, but I think we've got a really good precise idea there. So we add that in, and then we continue the writing. Other rituals featured specific agricultural products such as, so again, we return to the lecture notes And this time you're looking for rituals, something to do with rituals, but it has to give evidence of agricultural products. And again, another huge tip is we just finished off here, so I would just continue skim reading. Look for the word rituals in the headings, and if you find the word ritual, have a look at the details to see if it connects to the agricultural products. So I'll give you about 10 seconds to do that. Aha, you see it? The only other heading that mentions rituals is actually the one right below that says non-religious food rituals. And because we're looking for examples of agriculture, you can see about foods and feasting, and they mentioned things like tamales and turkeys and chocolate. So that seems to be a pretty good spot to look, right? So I've isolated the one example there from the Maya ritual feasts. So once again, we like the idea here. It definitely discusses our main point, but we just want to use our own language. So we might do it this way. So we'd say other rituals featured specific agricultural products, such as the tamales eaten at feasts. That's just taking one example here. We don't have to mention all of them. That the Maya, well, we can definitely use that word. You don't have to paraphrase it because it's the name of the people. Held after defeating an enemy. That summarizes nicely the wars that were won, or choosing a king. So again, we're just taking the words from the lecture notes, but we're playing around with them to make sure that they sound more like our own, right? So you're not inventing the content, you're actually discussing the content from the notes, but you are trying your very best to use your own language. So this paragraph is coming along. We might just add something like this. So remember, the question's asking us about how agriculture influences how and what we eat today. So it would be really nice if you could think of an example of a modern ritual, even from your own life. So if we say agricultural products are prominent in modern rituals as well. So for example, so if this were my test, because we've already cited several examples from the reading and listening, I think at this point it would be okay to bring in your own life example. So most of us have some sort of cultural event that involves food, like agricultural products. I myself think of, well, birthdays is maybe one where we have cake, any type of holiday. So for me, Christmas or Thanksgiving have always been huge family events where we eat lots of turkey and so on. You might have other food rituals and different events, and that's definitely fine. But this is just one example. This is true for me. You would write what's true for you. So we might say, for example, a typical Christmas dinner in Canada includes a farm-raised turkey as well as grain and vegetable side dishes. Birthdays are celebrated with cake, whose ingredients include flour, sugar, eggs, and milk. Okay, so again, that does come from your own life. You don't have to include these types of details, but if you have the time and can think of connecting these examples into the paragraph, by all means, you can certainly do that, and it will certainly help to support more content. So in summary, again, with the structure of the second middle paragraph, the main idea here is all about rituals, and you can see that's been identified up top in orange. Again, we've got three specific details. That first one in blue is all about how and what the Inca ate. So that's the past culture. In yellow, that second detail is how and what this time the Mayan people ate. And we got both of those details from the listening source. And in this third detail, that's from our own life examples. And we actually gave two. In this one, we talked about Christmas and birthday, but we made sure that we connected to the ritual of gathering and eating certain food products. So it all connects together. That's what the whole paragraph's discussing. Okay, so again, this is what the two middle paragraphs would look like, just to give you a sense of the length. So on your CAEL test, you'll have at least one middle paragraph, hopefully two. Some people, as they practice, might even have a third middle paragraph. But if you could aim for two middle paragraphs, I think that puts you in really good positions to earn that band 70 or 80 if you do it well. You'll notice as well that every time we have a new paragraph, we're leaving a blank space between them, just like you see here. Some people will indent. I myself, this is how most people do it. They do a block. Like it looks like one block of information up top with firstly, then we leave a blank line, and then secondly, that's our second paragraph. Each of these paragraphs is about 4 to 6 sentences. It's just that they're longer and more complex, which is what we want to do for academic writing. And usually your main idea is in the first sentence. So again, up top, it's all about how agriculture is responsible for what we eat. And in that second paragraph, it's about the food rituals that are celebrated by different cultures. And you'll notice that we have used both the reading and the listening sources to guide the writing here, which is what we like to do, and they're fairly balanced as well. Okay, so last but not least, let's just summarize what we've done here. For conclusions, so we've written, I guess, the introduction and the 2 middle paragraphs. Your concluding paragraph has to follow a couple of features. So let's do this really quickly. Repeat ideas from the introduction. Can you either put yes or no in the chat box? Do you think that in your conclusion, in your last paragraph on the CAEL test, should you be repeating ideas that you included in that first introductory paragraph? So a very quick yes or no would do it. We'll go through these as quickly as we can. And I see Omar and Anna are on it. Yeah, no, don't do that. Please don't repeat your ideas. You always want to come up with new and novel ideas. Should you be restating your opinion as well? Should you be restating, like, you know, looking up at the top and seeing what you wrote there? Can you just copy and paste that into your closing? And again, I would say, please don't do that either. There's no sense repeating. You've already made the case. Okay, remember the length of your CAEL conclusion. The middle paragraphs are longer, 4 to 6 sentences, but your CAEL conclusion can be anywhere from 1 to 3 sentences. It's going to be very short. That being said, it is not going to be any less formal than the middle paragraphs. We still have to use an academic approach. And I mentioned this one earlier. It's if you'd like to, this is a nice way to end. You can either make an observation or a prediction about what could come next. So if we're talking about food rituals and agriculture, we can assume that perhaps in the future, cultures around the world will continue to celebrate their own special events using food. That sort of thing would be a nice closing here. All right, but again, you don't want to just get into restating all your main ideas. So we don't have to reiterate what we've already explained. Keep it short and to the point. As I say, making a prediction for what's next is a really fun way to do that. All right, here's one sample conclusion. So this says, ultimately, ancient farmers are responsible not only for most of the items on our grocery list, but also for a long list of technological developments and social rituals that will no doubt continue through future generations. So we've not copied or repeated any ideas from anything we've written before. We've ended with an observation. We are connecting the past and the present with the future, which is really clever because this whole question asks us about eating habits over time. So this is an effective way to end here. So again, anywhere from 1 to 3 sentences. This is one sentence, so that's acceptable. We've not repeated. We've summarized what we've been talking about with an observation. So again, this is a very high level way to end. And you will receive this finished response in the study pack that we'll email to you. So of course, I won't read it to you now. You can do that later, but this is the exact essay from beginning to end, all 4 paragraphs we've looked at. So when you're fresh and after you've had a break, read it through all the way and just see how it connects. It's a really high level. I can't give you a score for it in the sense that we wrote it together and not in a testing room, but it would score very highly on the CAEL test. Okay, and on your CAEL test, speaking of, it would be ideal if you could save approximately 2 to 3 minutes even on your clock at the end before time is up to proofread. So you'd want to read your entire piece of writing to yourself, and you're basically looking to fix any mistakes at all. So please do make sure your paragraphs are organized well. Please make sure you corrected any spelling and grammar mistakes you might find. Look at your sentence structures, and like we did today, try to find ways to combine shorter sentences together. That's really helpful. If you notice any really casual words, try to fix them. Use a more academic choice. And again, make sure you've answered the question. That's key. All right. If you could do this even in 3 minutes, that would be ideal, but no more than 5 minutes for proofreading. The bulk of your work, again, is going to be on this. This is 288 words, by the way, that the essay we wrote. So it has to be at least 250. So we had a bit more time to go over that. So it's a really, really high level response. Anyway, enough about the long writing. All right, we've got 20 minutes left. I know we've done a lot of work today, but let's have a quick look at the short writing. This will go a lot faster as it is short. So we're done with this. We're done with the long writing. That's the major piece. It takes a lot of practice to write. Good news is your short writing is about 10 minutes to write 100 words. It's one paragraph. And again, you're only going to be using the reading or the lecture. So half the work is eliminated already. The checklist of skills that the raters are looking for you to demonstrate are shorter because, again, you're only writing one paragraph. So we're not going to be assessed on how the overall paragraph structures blend together, etc. But we still have to write strong content with lots of examples to support our topic. We have to structure it so that we've introduced the topic at the beginning and connected our ideas together. And the same language skills apply. Academic vocab, etc. Right? In your short writing, here's the good news. You are only writing one paragraph. You don't have to have your introductory statement to hook the reader's attention. You just get right to the answer of the question on the test because it's short. Right? You don't need your opinion statement either. You are answering a comprehension type question. Again, you're not using both sources. You don't even need a concluding statement. So this should be short and sweet and to the point, 10 minutes only. So I would say 30 seconds maybe when you start. You can do some pre-writing. So clearly read the question. If it tells you to look at the reading source, then have a look at the reading passage to pull out ideas. Or likewise, if it asks you to look at the listening, then look at the lecture notes. You might want to jot down a couple of key points that you'll be using, but you're only going to use the source material. You're not going to have time here for any personal opinions like we did for the long writing. So just pull out probably 3 details from the source would do it. And organize your ideas and paraphrase. That has not changed. Always use your own vocabulary if you can. So here's an example question from a past CAEL test. So this one says, based on the reading passage, what are the categories of joints in the human body? Give an example of each. All right. So really quickly, as you have 10 minutes to write the whole paragraph, can you tell us in the Zoom chat box what the important words are from this exact question? So I probably note a couple of things here. So what do you notice first? What's the first significant detail that you hopefully are noticing in this entire question? You have to know which source to use, right? So can you clearly see which source to use? So right away, please notice, is it the reading? Is it the listening? This one's the reading. The other keywords that you're going to look for in the reading passage, of course, are going to be the categories of the joints. So you'll see those words mentioned somewhere, and it's your job to find them quickly and pull them out. Because we're being asked what the categories are, you need to be able to identify and define them in writing, and you can't forget to give an example. So again, it's sort of these 3 steps that you'd want to notice right away. So the categories, because the whole passage is about the categories, we'd probably find that information near the beginning of the passage. All right, so I'm going to show you paragraph 1 and 2. I'm going to give you approximately, let's go with 45 seconds. Can you skim read both paragraphs 1 and 2 on screen? And let me know in the Zoom chat box, please, which of these 2 paragraphs actually identify the categories of joints. Look for those keywords, scan, find the words categories of joints, and see if you can actually find them. Is it in paragraph 1 or 2? That's all I need you to write in the Zoom chat box, 1 or 2. I'll give you some time to find it first. It takes practice. All right, so 3 of you are seeing paragraph 2. Who are we missing? Anna. Have you found it, Anna? It is actually paragraph 2, yes. Oh my gosh, Anna's even found the types. My goodness, fantastic. So as a group of 4 here, you found it. Excellent. So that's step 1, is just locating whereabouts in this reading passage I'm going to even find this information. And once you found it, that's really all you need to look at. So don't waste your time reading other parts of the passage, because you've got 10 minutes to answer the question. And you know paragraph 2 is the right place to look because you see the words here, type of joint. And the question says, how many categories of joints are there? So that's helpful, type of joint. And then when I see the word classified, that also connects to the notion of categories of joints. And then it also says the following categories. So right after that, following categories, you can see what Anna has put into our chat box. The categories actually are fibrous, cartilaginous, I hope I said that right, and synovial. So the answer to this question clearly is 3. There are 3 types of joints. And then you would identify those 3 types, and then you would probably define them and so on, go on from there. Okay, I want to show you what would be the wrong way to do this. This is important. So paragraph 1 is not the right place to look, but sometimes on a test when we're nervous and we've got a time limit, we get sucked into the wrong direction. So some people might notice right away here in paragraph 1, it does use the word joint. And I mean, the question says, how many categories of joints are there? But when we see the word joint in paragraph 1, it just says a joint is defined as, so that's just the definition of a joint. And then it tells us sort of what joints do in a general sense. Again, it can bend, it can do this, it can do that, right? You look down here as well. And then, yeah, they're movable, they're joints that do this and that. So this is interesting. It's about joints for sure, but it doesn't really dive into the categories of the joints. It's not till you look at paragraph 2, which you all did the right way, that you notice the categories are being defined. So don't get hoodwinked. That's a casual word that means don't get taken down the wrong path by looking at the wrong information. You want to find the right place immediately, so you can just start writing, as you've got only 10 minutes to do so. All right. So again, to structure this is probably how I would do it. You know, your introductory sentence could very easily just say, but all I would say is, there are 3 types of joints in the human body. That's how I would start this, right to the point. You might say the first type are called fibrous joints. You would define what they do and give an example. And you might go, secondly, cartilaginous joints, blah, 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 blah. Finally, synovial joints are responsible for blah, 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 blah. So something to that effect would work. One last time, let's see if you can correctly identify an introductory sentence here based on this question. Which one is right? Which one is best, I should say. Which one gets right to the point, on topic, uses academic wording? All right, Prashant and Anna are going with B. We'll give Omar and Katerina a wee bit of time. Hey, everybody said B. Excellent. Okay. Yeah, don't do this. Even though, yes, there are 3 categories of joints, like that part is correct. Please never in academic writing then waste your precious words saying, I will describe and provide an example of each. We know that's what you're going to do as you answer the question. So there's no need to tell us that. Plus, we've copied from the question on top of it. So 2 reasons why A is not the best choice for sure. Yeah, and this one's wrong as well. It's a hook, like it's interesting, but you would use that in an essay structure. We won't have time or even the need to do this in a short paragraph. So don't waste your time with that. Again, get right to the point. So you all answered correctly. This is definitely the best way to go. We've introduced the notion of joints. We've loosely defined them, what they are. They form connections between bones. And then we've also mentioned they're classified into 3 types, which is exactly what the question's asking us to do. You know, what are the categories of joints, and give an example. Perfect. Everyone got that right. Good. So we'll put that little topic sentence up there. So your little introduction, 1 sentence, right? clear topic. We are talking about joints, and they're classified in three types. There's no opinion here at all. You're stating facts. Don't waste your words on a hook. No time for that. Okay, so then again, you write the whole paragraph through. Likewise, just like we did with that long essay question, we still have to save a little bit of time to proofread for the exact same elements. So make sure your paragraph is structured well. Try to fix any spelling or grammar mistakes. Look at your sentence structure and your academic words and so on. Double check you've answered the question. That is so important. So 30 seconds to 1 minute tops. That's all you're going to have time for. Okay, so here's an example of somebody who wrote a paragraph to answer the same test question. You can see that it uses the same introductory statement that we just talked about up top. There are a couple of mistakes. I think there's 5. Yeah, 5 altogether. This is your last practice activity for the day. I know you're tired, but can you have a little skim read through and see if you can identify at least 1 or 2 little mistakes here? What would you fix if you had time to do this on your own CAEL test? Remember, there are 5 mistakes. I'm asking you to find at least 1 or 2 on your own. Phew. There's a lot of strengths here too, by the way. I don't want to suggest otherwise, but there are just a few little mistakes here that we would fix. Yeah, Prashant, notice the spelling mistake. Fantastic. There is a spelling mistake, and it's such a minor mistake. Most of us probably didn't even notice. I thought for sure, the first thing you would say is this one. That was noticeable to me. Do you see how, for whatever reason, we've left this blank line in the middle of a paragraph? So we don't want to do that. We just want to write the whole thing together. So we would take away those empty lines. So that's the first one. But yeah, Prashant, you've got it. This word movement is just simply missing the E. It's spelled wrong. That's a very minor thing. But yeah, it's there. What's wrong over here? I've just circled it for you in blue. What's wrong with this construction? And I see this often, believe it or not. It's super easy to fix, but you have to know what's wrong to fix it. Don't do this ever, not on the CAEL and not in real life. Do you see how there's no space there? So after the period, we have to leave 1 empty space, and then we start the word that. So don't forget to hit the space bar, because then all of a sudden your words get too crammed together, and it actually does make it harder to read them sometimes. Okay, there's a capital letter mistake in here. Can you find it for me quickly before I circle it? Which word incorrectly starts with a capital, and it should not have a capital on it? Go down about 2 more lines there, and you'll see it. Shall I circle it for you? Aha, Anna beat me to it. Thank you for doing that. Yeah. Yeah, this is another super common mistake I see from a lot of people, just in general. So it's a reminder that we use capital letters to start a sentence, or if it's the name of a person, place, or thing. When you have a common word like joints, it's just a thing in our body. It's not a name. It should have a smaller case J. Don't put a capital in the middle of your sentence unless it's a name, because then you confuse the reader too. And the other thing down here, this is actually a subject-verb agreement error, another very common mistake, but this one's harder to find. So it says hip joints. Joints is the subject. So it should be allow our legs to move both backward and forward. So we would remove the S from that to fix it, which we've done here. And again, you're going to receive this in your study pack, so I won't read the whole thing out to you, as you can look at it when you're fresher too, as I know we're getting tired. But this is 107 words, so it's just about perfect for length. We were asked to write 100 words minimum, and look what this person's done, 107 words, and it answers the question fully. So it's a nice example to study later on as you review. So we've got about 5 minutes left for you to ask any questions about CAEL, and I'm also going to quickly introduce to you our promotions and our free study products and so on, in case you want other academic skill sets to look at while you're waiting for the next live webinar. I will say that the CAEL is accepted for student direct stream. So that expedites your applications for a study permit in Canada, if that's what you're doing. Also, when you book a CAEL test, when it comes time to actually register for your test online, we have a huge promotion here. So you can see it says use code CAEL25. So as you're registering online for the test, if you punch in that code CAEL25, it's going to give you a 25% discount off of the test registration. So that's a huge savings right there. But it's also going to give you about $400 worth of free study products to help you prepare for CAEL further. So you're going to receive 5 free practice tests within this academic bundle. There's a CAEL Accelerate online course, one that helps you with reading, writing, one that helps you with listening, speaking, I guess. So those are free with this promotion. And there's also a product called the Practice Test Plus. So it's a material you go through on your own pace, really, and it follows the entire structure of a CAEL test start to finish. And it gives you lots of instruction and guidance. So again, you would get access to the free material after you booked the test. So if you're new to CAEL, like some of you are, you might want to hold off for now before booking because you need to be familiar with CAEL. But once you understand the CAEL test structure and you feel that this is the right test for you, what I would recommend you consider anyway is pick yourself a testing date. If you feel you need 2 months or 3 months to prepare, whatever that is, when you go ahead and book your test for the future date, that's when you're going to receive all of the free study materials to help you. And I find that when you actually book for anything, whether it's a test or the finish line, it makes you follow a study schedule and it keeps you honest. When we don't have any particular date in mind, sometimes we just don't bother studying that week, right? And we lose our momentum. So it's just something to think on anyway, if you're interested. We do have other webinars. So we just completed, this is the hardest webinar we deliver, by the way. So the fact that you made it 2 hours and had great participation says a lot about your seriousness to prepare for this test. All of these sessions, I shouldn't say all, the red and green ones here are only 90 minutes long. They're a little bit shorter. That CAEL 101 at the top is an introduction to the test. The CAEL 200 series will walk you through all of the elements of language. So you'll do speaking. There's another one on just the reading, then the listening, and more writing. Okay, we do have a 2-hour speaking workshop too that you can also register for. We offer roughly 2 webinars live every single month. So have a look at the October schedule and there might be something there that suits. You can also visit our YouTube channel. So the name of the YouTube channel is CAEL Official. We've got lots of free series there posted. There is a CAEL Live series that it's an older series, but it's got some interviews with different CAEL test takers. So they've got their own tips and strategies to share. And on the right-hand side here, it says CAEL Prep with Brandy. So I'm Brandy, the one in the green there looking at you. This was my little series. I whipped together about 42 episodes just to give more language instruction about different parts of the CAEL test. So if you wanted more shorter lessons, they're about 20 to 30 minutes tops. You can peruse the playlist there and watch for free. Totally up to you. Might be helpful there. And again, you can see we've got 2 free sample tests right on the website. And you can also download for free a study guide from the website too. The online bookstore does sell. And again, a lot of these products are included with that free bundle. So remember, we have 11 practice tests, but you would get 5 of them free once you register for the CAEL test with that promo code. The Accelerate program, same thing. It's $30 on its own, or you would get that free with the bundle. Practice Test Plus, same thing. You can buy it for $30 or it comes free with that bundle. And there is a small academic skills book. Or sorry, the focus, I mean, is a textbook series. It's the vocabulary builder that is a small little help with that there. Anyway, I'm going to leave you with that there because we're pretty much at our time. Do you have any questions about CAEL or writing or anything you'd like to ask now before we log out for the day? Oh, what I should do, sorry. These are the same products I just discussed. So for time, I'm just going to skip them. I wanted to show you just here, just in case. Our email customer service address is at the top. So I thought I'd better show that to you, info@cael.ca. If you do have questions later on, please email there and one of us will answer. Again, these 5 social media channels do have free products uploaded. So we do on Instagram a couple times a week, we put little tiny academic skill sets that you can have a look at. The YouTube channel has a lot of these free series that I mentioned. All of our webinars, by the way, that we do live, We keep one master copy that's recorded on the YouTube channel. So you can always go there on your own and watch it rather than wait for us to email you a copy too. But yeah, so that will take us perfectly to the end of our 2-hour session. So it's been a pleasure working with all 4 of you. And I thank you so much for your insights and your participation in our chat box. It really helps everybody out when you pull your ideas together. So have a great rest of your day, a great week ahead, and maybe I'll see you at the next webinar. Take care, everybody.